Atmosphere, London, September 1891. The circus has arrived near London, the train creeping in just after nightfall, without drawing any notice. The train cars collapse, doors and halls sliding apart, silently forming chains of windowless rooms. Canvas stripes unfurl around them, uncoiled ropes snapping taut, and platforms assembling themselves amongst carefully draped curtains. The company assumes there is a crew that accomplishes this feat while they unpack their trunks, though some aspects of the transition are clearly automated. This was once the case, but now there is no crew, no unseen stage hands moving bits of scenery to their proper places. They are no longer necessary. The tents sit quiet and dark, as the circus will not be open to the public until the following evening. While most of the performers are spending the night in the city, visiting old friends and favorite pubs, Celia Bowen sits alone in her backstage suite. Her rooms are modest in comparison to others hidden behind the circus tents, but they are filled with books and well-worn furniture. Mismatched candles burn merrily on every available surface, illuminating the sleeping doves in their cages hanging among sweeping curtains of richly colored tapestries. A cozy sanctuary, comfortable and quiet. The knock on the door comes as a surprise. "Is this how you intend to spend your entire night?" Tsukiko asks, glancing at the book in Celia's hand. "I take it you came to suggest an alternative?" Celia asks. A contortionist does not often visit solely for the sake of visiting. "I have a social engagement, and I thought you might join me," Tsukiko says. "You spend too much time in solitude." And Celia attempts to protest, but Tsukiko is insistent, taking out one of Celia's finest gowns, one of few with any color, a deep blue velvet embellished with pale gold. "Where are we going?" Celia asks, but Tsukiko refuses to say. It is too late an hour for their destination to be the theater or the ballet. Celia laughs when they arrive at La Maison du Frère. "You could have told me," she says to Tsukiko. "Then it would not have been a surprise," Tsukiko responds. Celia has attended only a single function at La Maison du Frère, and that was more a pre-circus opening reception than proper midnight dinner. But despite visiting the house on only a handful of occasions between her audition and the opening of the circus, she finds she is already acquainted with each of the guests. Her arrival with Tsukiko is a surprise to the rest of them, but she is greeted warmly by Chandrish and swept into the parlor with a glass of champagne in her hand before she can apologize for her unexpected presence. "See that they set an additional place for dinner," Chandrish says to Marco, before taking her on a cursory spin around the room to make sure she has met everyone. Celia finds it odd that he does not seem to remember. Madame Padva is gracious as always, her gown the warm copper-bottom leaves glowing in the candlelight. The Burgess sisters and Mr. Barrs have apparently already been making light of the fact that the three of them have all worn various shades of blue, an unplanned detail, and Celia's gown is cited as proof that it must simply be in fashion. There is some mention of another guest that may or may not be attending, but Celia does not catch his name. She feels slightly out of place in this gathering of people who have known each other for so long, but Tsukiko makes a point of including her in the conversation, and Mr. Barrs pays such attention to her every word when she does speak that Lainey begins to tease him about it. While Celia knows Mr. Barrs quite well, having met with him several times and exchanged dozens of letters, he does an impressive job of pretending they are mere acquaintances. "You should have been an actor," she whispers to him when she is certain no one will overhear. "I know," he replies, sounding genuinely sad. "Such a shame that I missed my true calling." Celia has never spoken with either of the Burgess sisters at much length. Lainey is more talkative than Tara, and tonight she learns in greater detail the touches that they have put on the circus. While Madame Padva's costumes and Mr. Barris's feats of engineering are obvious, the mark of the Burgess sisters is more subtle, though it permeates almost every aspect of the circus. The scents, the music, the quality of the light, even the weight of the velvet curtains at the entrance. They have arranged each element to appear effortless. We like to hit all of the senses, Lainey says. Some more than others, Tara adds. True, her sister agrees. Scent is often underestimated when it can be the most evocative. They are brilliant with atmosphere, Chandrish remarks to Celia as he joins their conversation, switching her empty glass of champagne with a freshly poured replacement. Both of them absolutely brilliant. The trick is to make it seem as though none of it is purposeful, Lainey whispers, to make the artificial feel natural. To tie all the elements together, Tara finishes. It seems to Celia that they provide a similar service within the present company. Celia doubts that these gatherings would have continued so long after the circus began without the Burgess sisters' infectious bubbling laughter. They ask the perfect questions to keep the conversation flowing, warding off any lulls. And Mr. Bars provides an ideal contrast, serious and attentive, keeping the dynamic of the group in balance. A movement in the hall catches Celia's eyes, and while anyone else might have credited a number of candles or mirrors for the reflection, she knows the cause immediately. She steps out into the hall unnoticed, slipping out of sight into the shadowed library across from the parlor. It is lit only by a panel of stained glass stretching in a glowing sunset along one wall, sending its warm hue cascading over the closest shelves and letting the rest of the room fall into shadow. Can I not have one evening to enjoy myself without you following me? Celia whispers into the darkness. I do not think social engagements of this sort are a proper use of your time, her father replies, the sunset light catching part of his face and the front of his shirt in a distorted column of red. You do not get to dictate how I spend every moment of my time, Papa. You are losing your focus, Hector replies. I cannot lose my focus, Celia says. Between new tents and embellishments, I actively control a significant part of the circus, which is closed at the moment if you hadn't noticed. And the better I know these people, the better I can manipulate what they've already done. They created it, after all. I suppose that is a valid point, Hector says. Celia suspects he is scowling despite the admission, though it is too dark to tell. But you'd do well to remember that you have no reason to trust anyone in that room. Leave me alone, Papa, Celia says, and sighs. Miss Bowen? A voice says behind her, and she turns, surprised to find Chandrish's assistant standing in the doorway watching her. Dinner is about to begin, if you would care to join the rest of the guests in the dining room. My apologies, Celia says, her eyes darting back to the shadows, but her father has vanished. I was distracted by the size of the library. I did not think anyone would notice I was missing. I am certain that they would, Margot says, though I have been distracted by the library myself many times. The charming smile that accompanies the statement catches Celia off guard, as she has rarely seen anything but varying degrees of reserved attentiveness or occasional nervousness on his countenance. Thank you for coming to fetch me, she says, hoping that dinner guests talking to themselves while supposedly perusing books without the aid of proper lighting is not an unusual occurrence at La Maison du Fleuve. They likely suspect you vanished into thin air, Margot responds as they walk through the hall. I thought perhaps that was not the case. He holds each door open for her as he escorts her to the dining room. Celia is seated between Chandrish and Tsukiko. This is preferable to spending the evening alone, is it not? Tsukiko asks, smiling when Celia admits that it is true. As the courses progress, when she is not distracted by the astounding quality of the food, Celia makes a game of deciphering the relationships between the guests, reading the way they interact, intuiting the emotions hidden beneath the laughter and conversation, catching the places that gazes linger. Chandrish's glances at his handsome assistant grow more off with each glass of wine, and Celia suspects Mr. Alastair is well aware of it, though Margot remains a quiet presence at the edge of the room. It takes her 3 courses to determine which of the Burgess sisters Mr. Boris favors, but by the time the artfully arranged plates of what appear to be whole pigeons spiced with cinnamon arrive, She is certain, but she cannot tell if Lane herself knows. Madame Padva is called Tante by the entire company, though she feels more like a matriarch than merely an aunt. When Celia addresses her as Madame, everyone turns to look at her in surprise. So proper for a circus girl, Madame Padva says with a gleam in her eye. We shall have to loosen those corset laces if we intend to keep you as intimate dinner company. I expected the corset unlacing would take place after dinner, Celia says mildly, earning a chorus of laughter. We shall be keeping Miss Bowen as intimate company regardless of the state of her corset, Chandler says. Make a note of that, he adds, waving a hand at Margot. Miss Bowen's corset is duly noted, sir, Margot replies, and the laughter bubbles over the table again. Margot catches Celia's glance with a hint of the smile from earlier before he turns away, fading into the background again, almost as easily as her father vanishes into shadows. The next course arrives, and Celia returns to listening and observing, in between trying to figure out if the meat disguised in feather-light pastry and delicate wine sauce is actually lamb, or something more exotic. There is something about Tara's behavior that Celia finds bothersome, something almost haunted in her expression that comes and goes. One moment she is actively engaged in the conversation, her laugh echoing her sister's. And the next she seems distant, staring through the dripping candles. It is only when the echoed laugh sounds almost like a sob for a moment that Celia realizes that Tara reminds her of her mother. The dessert course halts the conversation entirely. Globes of thinly blown sugar sit on each plate and must be broken open in order to access the clouds of cream within. After the cacophony of shattering sugar, it does not take long for the diners to realize that, though the globes appeared identical, each of them has been presented with an entirely unique flavor. There is much sharing of spoons, and while some are easily guessed as ginger with peach or curried coconut, others remain deliciously mysterious. Celia's is clearly honey, but with a blend of spices beneath the sweetness that no one is able to place. After dinner, the conversation continues over coffee and brandy in the parlor, until an hour most of the guests deem extremely late, but Tsukiko points out that it is comparatively early for the circus girls. When they do begin to say their goodbyes, Celia is embraced no differently than anyone else, and given several invitations to meet for tea while the circus remains in London. Thank you, she says to Tsukiko as they leave. I enjoy that more than I had expected to. The finest of pleasures are always the unexpected ones, Tsukiko replies. Margot watches from the window as the guests depart, catching a last glimpse of Celia before she disappears into the night. He does a round through the parlor and dining room, and then downstairs to the kitchens to make certain everything is in order. The rest of the staff has already departed. He extinguishes the last of the lights before ascending several flights to check on Chandrish. Brilliant dinner tonight, don't you think? Chandrish asks when Marco reaches the suite that comprises the entire fifth story, each room lit by a multitude of Moroccan lanterns that cast fractured shadows over the opulent furniture. Indeed, sir, Marco says. Nothing on the agenda for tomorrow, though, or later today, whatever time it is. There is the meeting in the afternoon regarding next season's ballet schedule. Ah, I had forgotten, Chandrish says. Cancel that, would you? Of course, sir, Marco says, taking a notebook from his pocket and marking down the request. Oh, and order a dozen cases of whatever that brandy was that Ethan brought. Marvelous stuff, that. Marco nods, adding it to his notes. You're not leaving, are you? Chandrish asks. No, sir, Marco says. I had thought it too late to be going home. Home, Chandrish repeats, as though the word sounds foreign. This is your home as much as that flat you insist on keeping is. More so, even. I shall endeavor to remember that, sir, Marco says. Miss Bowen is a lovely woman, don't you think? Chandrish remarks suddenly, turning to gauge the reaction to the question. Caught by surprise, Marco only manages to stammer something he hopes resembles his standard impartial agreement. We must invite her to dinner whenever the circus is in town, so he might get to know her better, Chandra says pointedly, emphasizing the statement with a satisfied grin. Yes, sir, Marco says, struggling to keep his expression impassive. Will that be all for tonight? Chandrish laughs as he waves him away. Before he retires to his own rooms, a suite 3 times the size of his flat, Marco quietly returns to the library. He stands for some time in the spot where he found Celia hours before, scrutinizing the familiar bookshelves and the wall of stained glass. He cannot guess what she might have been doing, and he does not notice the eyes staring at him from the shadows.